What if some of cinema's biggest names weren't just talented performers, but also remarkably lacking in basic intelligence? Today we delve into classic Hollywood stars whose real-life mental limitations became industry folklore. These stories emerge from studio documents, colleague interviews, and personal accounts that reveal a different side of legendary fame. Johnny Weissmuller. Weissmuller's transformation from Olympic swimming champion to Hollywood's most famous Tarzan seemed like a natural progression. With 5 Olympic gold medals and a bronze under his belt, MGM saw box office potential in his athletic physique and primal screen presence. However, once the cameras stopped rolling, Weissmuller's intellectual limitations became the stuff of studio legend. Production assistants regularly noted Weissmuller's struggles with basic script comprehension. Directors learned to minimize his dialogue, often replacing complex conversations with physical action sequences, or his famous Tarzan yell. When he did forget lines, which happened frequently, Weissmuller would resort to improvised grunts and chest pounding that somehow fit his character perfectly. His financial decisions were spectacularly misguided. Despite earning substantial paychecks throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Weissmuller invested in a series of failed ventures, including jungle-themed restaurants that served authentic African cuisine in suburban Los Angeles. He also poured money into a scheme to import exotic animals for private zoos, only to discover the legal complications and costs involved. Wallace Beery dominated MGM's roster during the 1930s. His gruff exterior and imposing physical presence making him one of the studio's most bankable stars. His Academy Award win for The Champ in 1931 seemed to validate his screen persona, but industry insiders knew a different truth about Beery's off-camera limitations. Studio memos reveal consistent complaints from directors about Beery's inability to handle nuanced direction or emotional complexity. Scripts were routinely rewritten to accommodate his limited comprehension, with sophisticated dialogue replaced by simple, declarative sentences that he could memorize phonetically. Even then, Beery often struggled to understand the meaning behind his words. His behavior on set was notoriously difficult. Co-stars, particularly child actors, reported his tendency toward physical roughness during scenes, apparently unaware of his own strength or the discomfort he caused others. Joan Crawford famously refused to work with him again after one collaboration, describing the experience as professionally degrading. Beery's business ventures reflected his poor judgment. He invested heavily in ostrich farming, convinced it would become the next agricultural boom. When that failed, he moved his money into novelty candy manufacturing, certain that edible jewelry would revolutionize the confectionery industry. Both enterprises collapsed within years, leaving him financially vulnerable despite his continued film success. George Raft possessed every quality necessary for 1930s stardom: distinctive looks, street-smart demeanor, and authentic connections to organized crime that gave his gangster roles credibility. However, his career became a masterclass in self-sabotage as he consistently made decisions that defied logic and destroyed his own prospects. Raft's approach to script selection was remarkably superficial. He chose roles based primarily on how tough his character appeared, showing little interest in plot quality, director reputation, or career strategy. This led him to reject 3 films that would define classic cinema: The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca, and Double Indemnity. Each rejection handed career-making opportunities to other actors. His personal associations compounded his professional problems. Raft maintained close friendships with notorious mobsters, including Bugsy Siegel and Frank Costello, relationships that made studio executives nervous and limited his casting options. He seemed genuinely confused when these associations created professional obstacles. Financial management was equally disastrous. Raft gambled away substantial earnings at underground casinos, apparently believing his luck would eventually turn. He made impulsive investments in nightclubs and restaurants without researching the businesses or understanding the entertainment industry's economics. Buster Crab Clarence Linden, Buster. Crab's transition from Olympic swimming champion to serial movie hero seemed natural enough. His athletic build and all-American appearance made him perfect for adventure roles as Tarzan, Flash Gordon, and Buck Rogers. However, Crab's success masked a fundamental misunderstanding of the film industry and his place within it. Crab openly admitted in later interviews that he never read complete scripts, focusing only on action sequences while ignoring character development or story arcs. This approach worked for low-budget serials but prevented him from growing as a performer. Directors learned to work around his limitations, often dubbing his dialogue in post-production when his delivery proved inadequate. His resistance to career evolution proved particularly damaging. When offered opportunities to branch into dramatic roles or more sophisticated productions, Crabb consistently declined, believing audiences only wanted to see him in action scenarios. This self-imposed limitation trapped him in increasingly inferior productions as the serial format lost popularity. Business decisions reflected similar short-sighted thinking. Crabb invested his earnings in a chain of backyard swimming pool installation companies, apparently believing his Olympic credentials would guarantee success. Legal disputes over faulty installations and maintenance issues quickly bankrupted the venture, leaving him financially vulnerable. Esther Williams carved out a unique and profitable niche in Hollywood as the million-dollar mermaid, starring in elaborate aquatic musicals that showcased her swimming abilities alongside lavish production values. However, her success was built on a remarkably narrow foundation, and her inability to adapt or expand her skills ultimately limited her longevity. Williams showed little interest in traditional dramatic acting, focusing exclusively on her swimming sequences while largely ignoring other aspects of filmmaking. In her own memoir, she admitted to rarely reading scripts completely, joking that if a role didn't involve water, she wasn't interested. This attitude prevented her from developing the versatility necessary for career longevity. Personal relationships reflected similar lack of strategic thinking. Williams married 4 times, including to Fernando Lamas, who convinced her to abandon her career entirely to support his ambitions. When asked years later why she agreed to this arrangement, she provided the remarkably simplistic explanation that she liked strong men. Business ventures demonstrated equally poor judgment. Her line of swimming-related merchandise failed due to inadequate market research and poor management decisions. She declined television opportunities during the medium's growth period, apparently believing such work was beneath her established film status, even as movie roles became increasingly scarce. Milton Berle earned the nickname Mr. Television through his groundbreaking work in early broadcast comedy, commanding massive audiences during the medium's infancy. His Tuesday night show virtually emptied restaurants and movie theaters across America. However, Berle's success was undermined by ego-driven decisions and a stubborn refusal to evolve with changing entertainment preferences. Berle's approach to comedy relied heavily on stealing material from other performers, a practice that became increasingly problematic as the industry professionalized. He would brazenly reuse outdated vaudeville routines, sometimes decades old, apparently believing that his presentation alone justified the repetition. When writers attempted to modernize his material, Berle resisted, insisting that his proven formulas guaranteed success. His backstage behavior was notoriously difficult. Berle demanded approval over scripts he refused to read completely, fired writers on impulse, and alienated colleagues with his controlling personality. He seemed genuinely confused when his authoritarian approach created production problems and staff turnover. Business decisions reflected similar poor judgment. He turned down a lucrative MGM film contract because it would have required reducing his nightclub appearances, missing an opportunity to transition into cinema. His investment in a chain of comedy clubs bearing his name failed when he refused to visit any locations, leaving management to others while expecting personal oversight of creative decisions. Frank Fay commanded Broadway and vaudeville stages during the 1920s with impeccable timing and sophisticated wit that established him as one of America's premier live performers. His ability to control audiences and deliver complex material seemed to guarantee lasting success. However, Fay's backstage personality and social attitudes ultimately destroyed his career more thoroughly than any professional. Fay's early Hollywood experiences revealed his fundamental inability to work within collaborative systems. Studio memos describe him as impossibly difficult to direct, routinely ignoring instructions, rewriting scripts without permission, and openly mocking crew members he considered beneath his status. His arrogance alienated virtually everyone who worked with him. His personal beliefs proved even more damaging to his career prospects. Fay expressed openly anti-Semitic and racist views at a time when Hollywood's largely Jewish executive class was becoming increasingly intolerant of such attitudes. His drunken public rants during Prohibition earned multiple arrests and tabloid coverage that embarrassed studios and sponsors. The marriage to Barbara Stanwyck initially seemed to stabilize his reputation, but Fay's abusive behavior eventually drove away even this devoted supporter. Their divorce proceedings revealed a pattern of physical and emotional cruelty that further damaged his public image and professional relationships. William Frawley achieved television immortality as Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, but his path to that success was marked by decades of self-destructive behavior that nearly derailed his career multiple times. His chronic alcoholism and volatile personality made him a notorious figure in Hollywood long before television offered him redemption. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Frawley's drinking problems created legendary production delays and quality issues. Directors learned to schedule his scenes early in the day before alcohol could impair his performance, but even then, his preparation was often inadequate. Scripts were modified to minimize his dialogue when his condition made longer speeches impossible. His reputation for starting bar fights and disruptive public behavior led to bans from multiple Hollywood establishments. Studio security often had to escort him home from premieres and industry events where his behavior had become embarrassing. Colleagues described him as a talented performer whose personal demons consistently sabotaged professional opportunities. Lucille Ball initially opposed his casting as Fred Mertz, having heard stories about his unreliability and drinking. Desi Arnaz agreed to hire him only under strict conditions requiring sobriety during production. Surprisingly, Frawley met these requirements, but his offset behavior remained problematic throughout the show's run. Jean Arthur possessed one of Hollywood's most distinctive voices and a natural screen presence that made her perfect for Frank Capra's populist comedies and dramas. Her performances in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and You Can't Take It With You demonstrated genuine talent and audience appeal. However, her career was consistently undermined by crippling anxiety and an almost pathological inability to function within the Hollywood system. Arthur's fear of public interaction went far beyond normal stage fright or introversion. She refused press interviews, avoided public appearances, and often disappeared between projects for months at a time without informing her studio. Directors learned to accommodate her need for closed sets and minimal crew presence during filming. Her professional behavior created enormous production challenges. Arthur would have emotional breakdowns over minor issues like lighting changes or costume fittings, requiring sets to be rebuilt to accommodate her comfort level. She insisted on filming without observers, creating logistical nightmares for productions that required crew coordination. Despite achieving critical acclaim and Oscar nominations, Arthur consistently rejected opportunities that could have sustained her stardom. She turned down His Girl Friday, It's a Wonderful Life, and several roles specifically written for her talents, apparently unable to commit to projects that required normal promotional activities. Rod Steiger earned critical acclaim and an Academy Award for intense, psychologically complex performances in films like In the Heat of the Night and The Pawnbroker. His commitment to method acting and emotional authenticity seemed to guarantee lasting artistic success. However, his extreme approach to craft and rigid perfectionism ultimately isolated him from opportunities and limited his career potential. Steiger's devotion to method acting often crossed into professional sabotage. He would delay productions for hours while working himself into psychological states for scenes, apparently believing that spontaneous emotion was superior to prepared performance. Co-stars found these delays exhausting and unprofessional, with many refusing to work with him again. His script choices reflected a troubling pattern of self-defeating perfectionism. Steiger rejected Patton because he felt the role lacked emotional subtlety, passing up a performance that won George C. Scott an Oscar. He also turned down The Godfather, dismissing it as too commercial, then spent years publicly regretting both decisions while continuing to make similar choices. Personal behavior on sets became increasingly erratic as his career progressed. Directors described him as brilliant, but impossibly difficult, requiring extensive accommodation for his working methods while showing little consideration for other performers or production schedules. His mood swings and refusal to compromise made him a liability, despite his obvious talent. Earl Holliman entered Hollywood with considerable promise, winning a Golden Globe for The Rainmaker and appearing alongside established stars like Elvis Presley and John Wayne. His early success suggested a long and prosperous career ahead. However, Holliman's reluctance to challenge himself or take creative risks resulted in a gradual decline that puzzled industry observers who recognized his potential. Studio documentation reveals Holliman's consistent refusal to accept roles requiring accent work, emotional complexity, or unfamiliar character types. He repeatedly insisted that he was best suited for regular American guy parts, apparently believing that this narrow focus would ensure steady work rather than limit his opportunities. His approach to career development was remarkably passive. Directors noted his resistance to direction and unwillingness to stretch beyond comfortable performance boundaries. When offered the role in Judgment at Nuremberg, Holliman declined because he considered the material too political, apparently failing to recognize the prestige associated with such projects. Business decisions reflected similar lack of ambition or strategic thinking. He invested most of his earnings in a restaurant venture that failed due to poor management and inadequate market research. When television began offering substantial opportunities during the 1960s, Holloman declined most offers, apparently believing that film roles would continue indefinitely. Peter Lorre possessed one of cinema's most memorable faces and voices, creating unforgettable characters in classics like M and The Maltese Falcon. His intellectual depth and classical training suggested enormous potential for a varied and distinguished career. However, Lorre's profound insecurity and fear of typecasting ultimately trapped him in the very narrow roles he sought to escape. Arriving in Hollywood as a refugee from Nazi Germany, Lorre accepted whatever roles were offered, terrified of unemployment in his adopted country. His distinctive appearance quickly led to typecasting as villains and foreign eccentrics, but when offered opportunities to expand his range, he typically declined, believing audiences wouldn't accept him in different kinds of roles. His personal struggles compounded his professional limitations. Lorre became addicted to morphine during the 1940s, draining his finances on drugs and questionable medical treatments. He rarely negotiated contracts aggressively, allowing studios to pay him significantly less than co-stars of comparable prominence. The actor's intelligence was widely acknowledged by colleagues, but his self-doubt prevented him from leveraging his abilities effectively. When director John Huston offered him a dramatic role that could have reshaped his image, Lorre turned it down, explaining that he didn't want to confuse audiences who expected him to play certain types of characters. Tony Curtis' poverty in the Bronx to become one of Hollywood's most recognizable leading men during the 1950s and 1960s. His matinee idol looks and natural charisma made him perfect for both dramatic roles and light comedy. However, Curtis's approach to his craft was notably superficial, and his lack of intellectual curiosity ultimately limited his artistic development and professional longevity. Directors consistently noted Curtis's reluctance to engage with complex material or character motivation. Billy Wilder famously commented that directing Curtis required extracting performance elements frame by frame, as the actor seemed content with surface-level interpretation of his roles. His early career consisted largely of lightweight romantic comedies that emphasized his appearance over acting ability. Curtis's approach to script preparation was remarkably casual. He admitted in interviews to never reading screenplays completely, preferring to focus on his own scenes while ignoring overall story structure or thematic content. This approach worked for certain types of roles, but prevented him from developing the depth necessary for more sophisticated projects. His public statements often revealed a startling lack of awareness about his profession and colleagues. Curtis once dismissed Laurence Olivier as that English guy who yells a lot, demonstrating either genuine ignorance or a troubling disrespect for theatrical tradition and excellence. Guy Madison. Madison's discovery story reads like a Hollywood fairy tale. A telephone lineman spotted by an agent and transformed overnight into a movie star based purely on his exceptional physical appearance. However, Madison's rapid ascent to heartthrob status wasn't accompanied by any development of acting skills, professional instincts, or career management abilities. Studio records consistently describe Madison's performances as wooden and emotionally vacant. Directors required multiple takes to capture even passable scenes, as Madison struggled with basic elements like line delivery and facial expression. His screen presence relied entirely on his photogenic qualities, with little evidence of personality or charisma beyond his looks. His approach to the craft was remarkably passive. Madison would ask directors which way to face the camera even after several films, apparently never developing basic understanding of cinematic technique or staging. Crew members noted his lack of curiosity about filmmaking processes or interest in improving his abilities. Business decisions reflected similar lack of awareness or judgment. Madison purchased a ranch in Wyoming without adequate planning, staff, or revenue streams, watching the investment quickly fail through mismanagement. He showed little interest in learning from these mistakes or seeking professional advice. As his career declined during the 1960s, Madison was reduced to dubbed European productions and low-budget westerns. His inability to adapt to changing industry conditions or develop skills beyond his initial physical appeal made him obsolete as younger, more talented performers emerged. Madison had been given every possible advantage through his appearance and early opportunities, but lacked the intelligence, ambition, or basic competence necessary to build a lasting career on that foundation. These Hollywood legends remind us that talent, beauty, and even fame cannot compensate for fundamental limitations in judgment and intelligence. While their movies continue to entertain audiences decades later, their real-life stories serve as cautionary tales about the importance of wisdom, adaptability, and self-awareness. In an industry built on illusion, these stars proved that sometimes the most convincing performance is simply being yourself, even when that self is remarkably lacking in common sense. Their legacies live on not despite their limitations, but perhaps because of them, making them eternally human in an otherwise mythical landscape.